The night they told me to leave was supposed to be a celebration, my high school graduation dinner. My mother had cooked her famous pot roast, my father poured himself a whiskey, and for the first time in months, everyone seemed civil. I should have known that calm was the kind that comes before a storm. Aria, my father began, setting down his glass. You're 18 now. Time to start acting like it. The tone wasn't new. It was that clipped, judgmental one he always used when he was about to make a point he thought was wise. My mother, Carla, folded her napkin neatly beside her plate, eyes darting to my younger brother, Darren, who smirked like he already knew what was coming. I am acting like it, I said cautiously. I've been working after school and saving for college. My father waved his hand. College, right? You've been saying that for months, but we don't see you going anywhere. You're still here, still depending on us. It took me a second to realize what he was implying. My fork clinked against my plate. You mean, you want me to move out? We're saying it's time, my mother replied, her voice sugar-sweet but sharp underneath. Your brother's starting university soon. We need space, and it's only fair he gets the support you've had. I blinked, stunned. Support? You mean the part-time jobs I had to get just to pay for my books? Or the times you forgot to drive me to work because you said I should learn responsibility? My mother's smile tightened. My father leaned back, smirking. That attitude is exactly why you're not ready for the real world. You think everyone owes you something. I never said that. He slammed his glass down, the sound slicing through the air. You've had a roof over your head and food on the table. Don't act like you built that. Starting next week, you find your own way. I stared between them, my chest hollowing out. You're throwing me out before college? Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem now, my father said flatly. You'll figure it out. You're an adult. Darren chuckled under his breath. Guess you should have been nicer to mom and dad. The air in the room went still. I felt the blood drain from my face. You think this is funny? He shrugged. Maybe you'll finally learn how to survive without whining. My mother stood, gathering plates as if this were just another ordinary dinner. We'll pack up your things this weekend. I'll even give you one of the spare suitcases. That was it. No warmth. No love. Just logistics. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the childhood photos lining my wall. Me at 8 with paint on my hands. Me at 13 holding a science fair trophy. I'd worked so hard for everything, and none of it mattered. My parents' laughter echoed from downstairs, Darren's voice chiming in like they were already celebrating my absence. I started packing in silence, folding my few clothes into a duffel bag. Each piece felt like proof that I'd never really belonged here. When I reached for a framed photo of me and Grandma June, my eyes burned. She'd been the only person who ever truly believed in me. She'd passed a year ago, but I still remembered her raspy voice. Don't fight them to see your worth, sweetheart. Go where you're seen. I didn't have a car. I didn't have savings big enough for rent. But I had my high school diploma and a stubbornness that refused to die. The next morning, I found my suitcase by the door, already packed. My mother stood there sipping coffee like she was seeing off a guest. I packed your clothes and toiletries. The landlord down the street rents out rooms sometimes. You can try your luck. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. Make sure you take your junk from the garage. I'm cleaning it out tomorrow. No hug. No goodbye. Just dismissal. I dragged the suitcase down the front steps, feeling the sting of their rejection in every step. The morning sun was blinding, but the world felt gray. I stopped at the gate, heart pounding, and looked back one last time. My mother stood at the window with her coffee, unmoved. Darren appeared beside her, wearing that smug little grin. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a soft voice. Aria. I turned to see Mrs. Kearns, our elderly neighbor, watering her garden. You're leaving, dear? I nodded, forcing a smile. Apparently, I've graduated from this house too. She frowned. You take care, sweetheart. Your grandma was proud of you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Her words cracked something open in me. I nodded, clutching my bag tighter. At the bus station, I counted the cash I had left, $142. It wasn't much, but it was something. I was sitting there, trying not to cry, when a familiar voice broke through the chaos. Figured I'd find you here. It was Uncle Raymond, Grandma June's younger brother. He looked older, wearier but kind. He pressed a worn envelope into my hand. June made me promise I'd give you this if you ever needed a way out. Inside was $200 and a small note in my grandmother's handwriting. Don't prove them right, prove yourself. Love, June. Tears finally fell, but for once, They weren't from defeat. They were from a tiny spark of hope. Uncle Raymond helped me board the bus to Brighton City, where I could maybe find a job, maybe start over. As the engine roared and the town faded behind me, I whispered to the window, "You'll see. One day you'll all see." The bus sped toward the unknown, and I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not sadness, but resolve. If they wanted me gone, fine. I'd go. And I'd make sure they never forgot the name Aria Lennox again. The city didn't welcome me with open arms. It barely noticed I existed. Brighton City was loud, indifferent, and too fast for someone who arrived with a single suitcase and $200. I stepped off that bus with my heart pounding in my chest, pretending not to be scared. Pretending was easier than breaking. I found a room in a rundown basement apartment that smelled like mildew and regret. The rent was cheap because no one else wanted it, but to me, it was freedom. I shared the space with two strangers, Kendra, a moody waitress who smoked indoors, and Lyle, a college dropout who stayed up all night playing video games. They didn't care about my story, and I didn't offer it. I just kept my head down, counted my coins, and told myself this was temporary. I got my first job at a diner downtown after lying on the application that I had full experience. The truth was, I didn't even know how to balance 6 plates at once. My boss, a gruff man named Mr. Yates, yelled more than he spoke, but he didn't fire me when I dropped a tray on my first day. "You'll toughen up or quit," he said. "Most don't last a week." I lasted because I had no choice. I needed every tip, every crumpled dollar bill just to keep the lights on. During the day, I served customers who didn't look me in the eye. At night, I cleaned offices for people who'd never know my name. My body ached constantly, and sometimes I cried in bathroom stalls where no one could hear. There were days I didn't eat just so I could pay rent, and nights I slept through hunger. I told myself it was fine, that this was the price of becoming something. One rainy night, a group of high school classmates came into the diner. They were dressed in expensive clothes, laughing like the world belonged to them. One of them, Mara, recognized me. "Aria Lennox?" she said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Didn't you graduate with us? You work here now." I froze, tray in hand, while the others giggled. "Wow," she continued. "Guess some people really peak in high school." The laughter stung worse than anything my parents ever said. I forced a smile and served their food without saying a word. But later that night, I saw a photo of me online. Someone had snapped it and posted, "Hometown girl serving fries now. Life comes at you fast." The comments were brutal. I scrolled through every one, eyes burning, then printed the post and taped it above my bed. If they wanted to laugh, I'd make sure one day they choked on their words. I started spending my breaks watching free coding tutorials on my phone. I'd always been good with computers, and something about building things, creating order from nothing, made me feel in control again. I taught myself late at night after cleaning shifts, my hands trembling from exhaustion but my mind alive. I didn't have a fancy laptop, just an old borrowed one from Lyle that overheated every 20 minutes. Still, I kept going. It was during one of those late nights at a coffee shop that I met Theo Haynes. He was sitting at the next table, sketching in a worn notebook, muttering to himself about perspective lines. When my ancient laptop crashed for the 5th time, I groaned out loud. He looked up and grinned. "That thing's dying a heroic death," he said. I couldn't help but laugh. We started talking. Turns out he was a street artist trying to make a name for himself, selling paintings in alleys, getting ignored by galleries, surviving on coffee and stubbornness. Theo was the first person in months who didn't look at me like I was a failure. He listened when I talked about my family, about how I wanted to build something that was mine. "You already are," he said. "You're surviving, aren't you? That's the first step to building." We became friends fast. I helped him create an online page for his artwork. Nothing fancy, just photos and contact info. Within a week, he sold 2 pieces. He was so grateful he treated me to dinner, which in our broke universe meant instant noodles with actual chicken in it. It felt like a feast. For the first time since leaving home, I laughed without pretending. Every small success gave me strength. When I finally made my first $500 from freelance work, a small business website, I stared at the screen for 10 whole minutes before it sank in. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that I didn't need my parents' roof, or their pity, or their approval. Proof that I could build something with my own hands. That night, I called my father, not to talk, but just to hear the ring. It went to voicemail. His recorded voice said, "This is Patrick Lennox. Leave a message." I didn't. I just listened, smiled bitterly, and hung up. Then I looked at the taped post above my bed, the one mocking me, and whispered, "Let's see who laughs last." Outside, the city buzzed like it didn't care whether I failed or thrived. But I cared. And I was just getting started. The first time I realized I might actually be good at something, it wasn't because anyone told me. It was because I built something that worked, and nobody believed I could. It started one Tuesday afternoon in the coffee shop where Theo and I practically lived. He was sketching another mural concept, hands stained with charcoal, while I was buried in code on my beat-up laptop. The hum of espresso machines mixed with the faint jazz playing overhead. The place always smelled like burnt beans and new beginnings. Theo leaned over, peering at my screen. "You've been staring at that same line for 20 minutes. "I'm debugging," I muttered. "The code works, but it doesn't feel right." He chuckled. "You talk about code like I talk about art. It's creepy." "Yeah. Well, you talk to your paintbrushes." He grinned. "They listen better than people do." That was Theo, equal parts chaos and calm. He never made me feel small. Never looked at me like the girl who'd been kicked out and left behind. To him, I wasn't broken. I was just unfinished. After a few minutes of silence, he said, "What if you use that thing you're building to help artists like me? You know, sell our stuff online or something?" I looked up surprised. "You mean like a platform?" "Yeah. I've tried those art sites. They're impossible. You could build one that actually works." The idea stayed with me long after he left that night. I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, the sound of Lyle's video games leaking through the wall, and thought about it. A site for creators. Something that could actually change lives, maybe even my own. But dreams were expensive, and I still had bills to pay. Days blurred into weeks. I juggled freelance projects with long shifts, burning myself down to embers. I stopped keeping track of sleep. Every time I felt like quitting, I'd think of my parents' faces, the satisfaction when they told me to leave, the smirk in Darren's eyes. The image fueled me more than any coffee ever could. One night, around midnight, I was walking home from the diner after a double shift. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzes with leftover noise. I passed a gallery, the lights still on, and stopped. Through the window, I saw Theo inside. He was setting up his paintings, bold strokes of color that screamed pain and pride all at once. I watched silently until he noticed me and waved me in. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Setting up for the open showcase tomorrow," he said. "They finally gave me a slot." "That's huge." "Yeah," he said, grinning. "Except they take 50% of the cut. So, you know, huge is relative." I laughed. But then I saw it, the worry in his eyes. The kind that comes from realizing even success can trap you. That's when it hit me. He didn't just need an audience. He needed a way to survive. And maybe I could help. Over the next few weeks, I worked on building a simple prototype of his idea, a website that could let independent artists sell their work directly. I called it Rootrise, because people like us didn't grow from perfect soil, we grew through cracks. Theo was thrilled when I showed him the mock-up. "You actually did it," he said. "You made it real." "Not yet," I replied. "It still needs to function." He looked at me like I'd just handed him sunlight. "Aria, this is going to change everything." It was the first time someone had ever said those words to me. But not everyone shared Theo's faith. My coworker at the diner, Kendra, caught me coding on my phone during a break and rolled her eyes. "Still chasing that pipe dream? You should just find a rich guy instead. Way easier." I smiled without replying. People like Kendra didn't understand. This wasn't about luck. It was about survival. One night, Theo invited me to his art showcase. I wore the only dress I owned, a faded navy one from high school, and tried not to feel out of place among the glittering crowd. Theo looked different that night, confident, electric. When people praised his work, I felt proud, like somehow I'd helped him get there. But then I heard one of the gallery owners, a woman dripping in diamonds, say to him, "These are good, but you'll never sell unless you brand yourself. People buy names, not art." Theo forced a smile, but I saw his jaw tighten. Afterward, he muttered, "They don't care about the message, just the market." "That's why we'll build something better," I said. He smiled faintly. "We? Yeah, we. You think I'd let you have all the credit?" For a moment, his eyes softened in a way that made my stomach twist. There was something unspoken between us, a pull neither of us acknowledged. We started meeting every night to work on Rootrise. I coded while he brainstormed features and drew mock-ups on napkins. The coffee shop became our second home, the staff so used to us they'd leave the lights on an extra hour. I was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and hope. Then came our first break. Theo's friend Lana, a social media influencer with a small following, agreed to promote Root Rise once it went live. It could actually blow up, Theo said, pacing excitedly. This is it, Aria. I smiled, but my heart pounded with fear. What if it failed? What if my code broke and humiliated us both? I'd seen failure before, but this time, it would be public. That week, I barely slept. I rebuilt the entire backend twice, cried over lost files, and survived on instant noodles and cold coffee. Theo tried to help, but I pushed him away. I need focus, I snapped one night. He stared at me for a moment before quietly leaving. Guilt ate at me immediately, but I couldn't stop. This was the first thing that ever mattered. When we finally launched Root Rise, the site was basic but functional. A handful of creators signed up. The first sale came in 2 days later, a $60 painting from Theo's page. We screamed, laughed, hugged. It was the first time in years I'd felt something close to joy. That joy didn't last long. 3 days later, the site crashed. All our data vanished. I panicked, heart in my throat. I stayed up 40 hours straight trying to fix it. Theo found me at the coffee shop, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. Aria, stop. You need rest. I can't rest. I yelled. If this fails, it's all over. I can't go back to nothing. He hesitated. You're not nothing. Tell that to the people who threw me out. Theo's face hardened. You're not doing this for you anymore, are you? You're doing it to prove them wrong. I didn't answer. Because he was right. The site eventually recovered. The users returned. But the argument left a crack between us. He stopped staying late. I pretended not to notice. Weeks passed. Root Rise slowly gained traction. Creators started tagging us online, thanking us for giving them freedom. Every ping of a notification felt like a heartbeat. Then one morning, I woke up to chaos. Hundreds of messages, new signups, media requests. Lana's video had gone viral overnight. She'd praised Root Rise for empowering small artists and told her followers to join. Our servers nearly crashed again, but this time from success. Theo showed up at my apartment, breathless. We did it. I laughed and cried at the same time. We actually did it. For the first time since leaving home, I didn't feel like the discarded daughter or the invisible girl. I felt like someone who mattered. But success, I learned, changes people, or maybe it just reveals them. As Root Rise grew, attention poured in. Investors reached out. News outlets wanted interviews. Everyone called me the tech prodigy. They mentioned Theo too, but as her artist friend. I noticed the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when journalists called me the brains of the operation. One night, I caught him staring at his sketchbook instead of the code. You okay? I asked. He shrugged. Yeah. Just thinking. About what? About how this was supposed to be ours. But now everyone only sees you. The word stung. I didn't ask for that. I know. But it's happening. We didn't speak for days after that. The silence felt heavier than any insult could have been. I tried reaching out, but he avoided me. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a post on his page, starting my own platform soon. Stay tuned. My heart sank. Betrayal hit like a punch. When I confronted him, he said, "You don't understand. You're already miles ahead, Aria. I just want something that's mine." But Root Rise was ours. I shouted. He looked down. It stopped feeling that way. The next morning, I woke up to another storm. Theo's post had gone viral. People were taking sides. Some accused me of stealing his idea. Others defended me. The internet was eating us alive. I wanted to call him, to fix it, to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong. But I didn't. Instead, I threw myself into work. I poured every ounce of pain into improving Root Rise, expanding its reach, making it undeniable. And it worked. Within 3 months, Root Rise was featured on a major tech site. They called it the platform redefining creator independence. My inbox overflowed with opportunities. The same people who once ignored me now wanted partnerships. But every success felt hollow. The seat next to me at the coffee shop stayed empty. The laughter, the brainstorming, the stupid napkin sketches, all gone. Late one night, after a press event, I scrolled through old messages from Theo. Our last conversation read, "Theo, you'll make it big. You don't need me. Me, you're wrong. I always did." I never sent it. Instead, I closed my laptop, looked out at the glittering city skyline and whispered, This is what you wanted, right? The stars didn't answer. Neither did he. But beneath the ache, something stronger was growing. A quiet, burning certainty. I'd built this from nothing. I'd survived humiliation, hunger, and heartbreak. I didn't need validation anymore. Still, part of me wished he'd see what we'd created. That he'd be proud. Because the truth was, Rootrise wasn't born from ambition or revenge. It was born from survival. From the desperate need to prove I mattered. Not to them, not even to him, but to myself. And for the first time, I finally believed it. I wasn't the girl they threw away. I was the woman who learned to rise. The weeks after the showcase felt like a blur. Not the kind that comes after chaos, but the kind that happens when something inside you begins to shift. Aria woke up earlier, worked longer, and spoke less. Every conversation she had was either about improvement or strategy. The timid girl who once clung to fear now sat in late-night cafes sketching designs with a kind of hunger that frightened even her. Theo noticed it first. "You don't even blink when you draw now," he said one evening, sliding a coffee her way. They were sitting in their usual spot, a cracked wooden table near the window, surrounded by chatter and the sound of cups clinking. "I can't stop," Aria murmured, her pencil gliding over the page. "It feels like, if I stop, it'll all disappear. The spark. The clarity. Everything." He leaned back, eyes soft. "Then don't stop." The problem was she didn't. Days bled into nights. The cafe turned into a workspace, the small apartment into a studio, and exhaustion into a strange kind of high. Theo helped her build a portfolio, taking photos, writing mock presentations, connecting her with small local fashion markets. She started taking commissions, a few college kids who wanted custom jackets, a singer who wanted a bold stage outfit, even a small boutique owner who asked for a capsule collection. Every project made her stronger. Every mistake taught her more than any lecture ever had. But with growth came friction. The more she worked, the less she saw of the old crowd, the ones who had once pitted her for being the girl kicked out at 18. They started whispering again. This time, not with pity, but suspicion. "She's changed," one of them said at a gathering she accidentally walked past. "She thinks she's better than everyone now." Aria didn't stop walking. She just smiled. Because maybe she had changed, and for the first time, she didn't feel guilty about it. Then came the message that changed everything. It was a cold evening when Theo burst into her studio, holding his phone. "You're not going to believe this." "What?" she said, rubbing her tired eyes. "Threads and Vision. They're hosting an independent designer competition. National level. Submissions close in 2 weeks. The winner gets a mentorship with Celine Marquet." Her heart stopped. "Celine Marquet?" He grinned. "Yes. The Celine Marquet. Paris. Luxury line. The same woman whose designs you've pinned on your wall since forever." Aria froze, staring at the poster she'd taped above her sewing desk years ago, the one that said, "Be so good they can't ignore you." Theo leaned closer. "You have to enter." She hesitated. "It's national, Theo. These people have money, teams, years of experience." "So what?" "You've got grit." "That's rarer." That night, Aria didn't sleep. She pulled out every sketchbook, every fabric swatch, every piece she'd ever worked on. She was terrified, but beneath the fear was something fiercer, hunger. The next morning, she started designing her entry. The theme was rebirth. It couldn't have been more poetic. She poured herself into it, sleepless nights, pricked fingers, coffee-stained notebooks. The collection became her story. Brokenness stitched into strength, pain folded into purpose. The centerpiece was a crimson gown, bold, structured, unapologetic. She called it Phoenix. Theo became her shadow through it all, helping her gather materials, fixing zippers, cooking meals she forgot to eat. But as the deadline neared, tension crept in. He started acting distant, small things at first. Short answers. Avoiding eye contact. One evening, she found him staring at his phone, jaw tight. "Everything okay?" she asked. He forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." But Aria knew that look. The one people wore when something was wrong but they didn't know how to say it. The night before the submission, Theo finally confessed. "Aria, I got an offer." Her hands froze mid-stitch. "An offer?" He nodded. "A design assistant position in New York." The words hit her like ice. "When?" "I'd have to leave in 3 weeks." She blinked, her throat tightening. That's amazing." He frowned. "You don't sound happy." "I am. She forced a laugh. "You didn't even tell me you applied." I didn't think I'd get it. Silence. Aria turned back to her work, trying to focus, but the sound of the machine blurred. Theo stepped closer. Aria, I want to go. But I don't want to leave you in the middle of this. She didn't look up. You should go. You've earned it. Don't do that. Do what? That thing where you push people away before they can leave. Her chest tightened. I'm not. I can't need anyone right now, Theo. He sighed. Maybe you don't. But I still need you to want me here. Aria finally looked at him, eyes glassy. I do. I just don't know how to show it without losing focus. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Theo reached out, gently brushing a thread off her cheek. Then let me help you finish this. After that, we'll see where life takes us. They finished Phoenix together, wordlessly. The night before submission, Aria stood over the gown, exhausted and trembling. It was perfect. The day of the presentation, the hall was packed with judges, designers, and press. Aria walked in wearing her own design, confident, composed, radiant. She didn't have a brand name, a PR team, or a mentor, just her work. As she waited backstage, her phone buzzed. A message from a number she hadn't seen in years. Your aunt sent me a link. You're in some kind of contest? That's nice. Remember who raised you if you win. Her chest burned. She stared at the screen for a long moment before turning it off. When they called her name to present, she walked on stage like fire. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice didn't waver. This collection, she said, is about being told you're nothing and deciding to become something anyway. Gasps. Applause. Cameras flashing. Theo watched from the crowd, his eyes proud and shining. When the winners were announced, Aria's heart pounded. Second place .it wasn't first. But it was everything. She'd beaten hundreds of designers, stood beside the best, and for the first time, she was seen. Afterward, the head judge approached her. You have raw talent, Celine Marquet herself said, shaking her hand. Rough edges, but brilliance. You remind me of myself at your age. Keep in touch. Aria couldn't breathe. Theo laughed, pulling her into a hug. See? I told you. For the first time in years, she cried, not from pain, but from pride. That night, she and Theo sat on the rooftop of her building, the city lights glimmering like stars. So, he said softly, what now? She looked out at the horizon. Now, I built something that's mine. No one else's name on it. He nodded. And I'll be cheering for you wherever I am. She smiled. You'd better. He looked at her like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. Days later, he left for New York. Aria watched his train disappear into the distance, a strange ache in her chest. When she returned to her apartment, it felt emptier than ever. But in that silence, something stirred, determination. She picked up her sketchbook and wrote across the first page, Aria Vale, founder, Vale Studio. That was the night she stopped waiting for validation. She registered her small business, took freelance gigs, built a tiny website, and used every dime she had to launch a mini online store. Sales were slow at first, but she didn't care. Every order was a victory. Every late night was a promise to the scared girl she once was. Months passed. Reviews came in. Word spread. A blogger featured her designs. Then a local celebrity wore one of her jackets on TV, and overnight, orders exploded. She barely slept. She worked until her hands bled. But she never stopped. And somewhere late at night, she'd still text Theo. Updates. Jokes. Sometimes just, I miss our coffee table. He always replied, keep burning Phoenix. Then one evening, her phone rang, an unknown number again. Hello. A pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in years. Aria. It's your father. Her stomach turned cold. He cleared his throat. Your mother's been watching the news. Saw your interview. We're proud of you. Proud, she said softly. Of what? Throwing me out. He hesitated. We just thought, maybe we could visit. Her grip on the phone tightened. Now you want to visit? Aria, don't make this difficult. We're still your parents. Her voice broke into a quiet laugh. You made it difficult years ago, Dad. He said nothing. She hung up. Then she turned back to her sketches, tears falling silently onto the paper, not from sadness, but release. She wasn't that abandoned 18-year-old anymore. She was something stronger. And this time, no one, not even blood, could take it away. The silence after that call stayed with Aria like a bruise. It didn't fade, it deepened. Every time she passed her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized. Stronger, but lonelier too. Success, she realized, came with an echo. It was loud, but never warm. Weeks turned into months. Vale Studio was no longer just a name on her wall. It was a growing brand. Small, gritty, but alive. Her first pop-up booth at the downtown design fair had been a whirlwind. She'd expected mild curiosity. What she got was a line stretching around the corner. People weren't just buying clothes. They were buying her story. The grit, the rebellion, the rebirth. A journalist from Urban Muse asked her during an interview, "Your designs seem to carry a personal defiance. Is that intentional?" Aria had smiled faintly. "Everything I make is a conversation with my past. I just hope the future keeps answering." It became the quote that went viral. Suddenly, people wanted to know who Aria Vale was, where she came from, how she'd started, what made her so determined. The attention felt good, until it didn't. She began receiving messages not just from fans and clients, but from people who had once turned their backs on her. Former classmates who'd mocked her thrift store clothes now wanted collaborations. Distant relatives who had called her the disappointment suddenly remembered her birthday. And her parents, they didn't stop calling. First, it was her father, then her mother, then both together, leaving voicemails dripping with nostalgia and selective memory. "Aria, we just want to talk. You're still our daughter. Don't be stubborn, sweetheart. We were only trying to prepare you for life." Prepare her? She remembered the night they'd packed her suitcase while she cried in the hallway, begging them not to make her leave. Still, the human heart is a tricky thing. It remembers love even when it shouldn't. So one night, when her phone lit up again with her mother's name, Aria stared at it for a long time and answered. "Hi, Mom." The line was quiet for a moment before a soft gasp came through. "Oh, Aria. I didn't think you'd pick up." "I almost didn't." Her mother's voice trembled with the same sugar-coated tone Aria remembered from childhood. "I've been watching your interviews. You look beautiful, darling. So grown up." "Thanks. We should meet," her mother continued almost cheerfully. "Your father and I were thinking, maybe dinner? Just to catch up." "Catch up," Aria repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You mean pretend the last 8 years didn't happen?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Families fight. You kicked me out." Her mother sighed. "We did what we thought was best. You were reckless. I was 18. You needed to learn responsibility." "I learned it," Aria said coldly. "Just not the way you planned." Her mother went silent, the fake sweetness cracking. "You don't have to be rude, Aria. We're trying to make peace." "Peace," she whispered. "Or am I just profitable now?" "Aria." The call ended. Aria stood there, trembling. She felt like she'd run a marathon and drowned at the finish line. For the first time in years, she cried, the kind of tears that come when old wounds realize they'll never fully heal. Days later, her assistant, Lena, found her in the studio surrounded by unfinished pieces. "Hey," Lena said softly. "You okay?" Aria wiped her face. "Yeah. Just tired." "You need a break," Lena said. "You've been working non-stop." "Can't afford to stop now," Aria murmured. Lena tilted her head. "You mean financially?" "No. Mentally." The next week, an unexpected email arrived. From Celine Marquet Studio. Subject: Mentorship Opportunity, Paris Residency. Aria read it 3 times before she believed it. It was real. An invitation to work directly under the designer who had inspired her entire journey. A 6-month residency in Paris. Expenses covered. She called Theo instantly. He picked up from a noisy cafe in New York, voice breathless. "You're kidding. Paris." "I'm not." He laughed, loud and proud. "You deserve it, Aria. Every second of it." She smiled. "Come visit. I'll make you something ridiculous to wear. Only if you make it in red," he said, teasing. "Your signature color." "Deal." Before leaving, Aria visited her parents' town one last time, not to see them, but to stand outside the house that had once been hers. She parked across the street and watched as the porch light flickered on. The curtains were drawn. The same old house, same cracked mailbox, same ghost of a family that had chosen pride over love. She whispered under her breath, "You taught me how to survive, but I taught myself how to live." Then she left. Paris was a dream. Chaotic, beautiful, brutally honest. Celine Marquet wasn't the gentle mentor Aria had imagined. She was fierce, demanding, and terrifyingly brilliant. "You think talent is enough?" Celine told her one afternoon during a critique. It's not. Talent without discipline is noise. You have something rare, but you don't yet know how to control it. Aria took the criticism like a bruise. Painful, but necessary. Every sleepless night in that Paris apartment sharpened her. She learned precision, elegance, restraint. She learned how to say more with less. And she learned something else. Loneliness, even at the top, feels the same in every language. Theo called often. His voice became her anchor. I miss our chaos, he'd say. Paris has enough chaos for two, she'd reply. Still, he said, it's not the same without you. The distance between them became something unspoken, a quiet longing threaded through late-night calls. But neither dared to name it. Months passed. Her final presentation at the residency was a triumph. Celine watched her models glide down the runway, expression unreadable. When it ended, she simply said, "You've learned control. Now learn when to break it." It was the closest thing to praise she'd ever get, and it was enough. When Aria returned home, she wasn't just a designer anymore. She was a name. Veil's studio exploded internationally. Articles called her the phoenix of modern design. Celebrities wore her gowns. Investors called daily. But with fame came shadows. Her parents showed up at her office one afternoon. No appointment. No warning. Just there. Her receptionist buzzed nervously. There's a couple here claiming to be your parents. Should I? Aria's heart stopped. Send them in. They walked in looking older, smaller. Her father had lost weight. Her mother's hair was streaked with gray. They looked around the pristine glass office like tourists in a foreign country. Aria, her mother said softly, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. This is incredible. You've done so well for yourself. Aria sat behind her desk, calm. What do you want? Her father cleared his throat. We didn't come for money. Then why are you here? Her mother hesitated, then said, your father's business is not doing well. We thought maybe you could give him some advice. Advice, Aria repeated. After you told me I'd never make it? Her mother flinched. We made mistakes, Aria. No, Aria said quietly. You made decisions. Mistakes are accidents. Decisions are choices. Her father's jaw tightened. Don't talk to your mother like that. Like what? Like someone who still remembers the night you told her to pack her bags. Aria. No, she said sharply. You don't get to rewrite the story now that I've made it. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. We just wanted to see you. You're seeing me, Aria replied. And I'm busy. They stood there for a long, uncomfortable moment before her father muttered, You'll regret this. Aria leaned back, voice calm. I already did. Years ago. They left without another word. When the door closed, Aria exhaled, slow, steady, final. That night, Theo called. You okay? She hesitated. They came to my office today. Your parents? Yeah. What did they want? The usual. Access to something they didn't build. Theo sighed. You think they'll stop? No, she said. But I will. A long silence passed. Then he said softly, I think that's the first time you've ever sounded free. She smiled faintly. Maybe I am. After they hung up, Aria walked to her window. The city lights below shimmered like sparks on fabric. Messy, bright, alive. She thought about everything. The nights on Theo's floor, the hunger, the pain, the fire that never died. She whispered to herself. They said I'd never make it alone. Now they call me for money, and I let the silence answer. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, a storm brewing over the skyline. Aria smiled at the sound. She'd survived storms before. And this time, she was the lightning. Aria Veil had stopped counting how many times her story had been told without her permission. Magazines, blogs, podcasts, all loved to spin the same fairy tale version. Abandoned girl becomes fashion icon. They talked about her grit, her designs, her comeback. None of them talked about the nights she couldn't sleep, the days she couldn't breathe, or the loneliness that came with being admired but rarely understood. The silence after her parents' visit was supposed to bring peace. Instead, it left her with an ache that success couldn't drown out. She found herself staying later at the studio, pretending the glow of her monitors was enough company. Every design she drew looked flawless. But she could feel it. Something human was missing. Theo's voice still lived in her phone, in short messages sent across time zones. How's my phoenix? He'd text. Alive. Busy. Tired, she'd reply. Then hours later, that's my girl. But lately, even those texts had slowed. His job in New York had become more demanding. Her world was exploding faster than either of them could manage. The distance between them had turned from miles into silence. One evening, Aria was sitting in her office when her assistant Lena poked her head in. "Someone's here to see you." "Who?" Lena hesitated. "He says you'll want to see him." "His name's Theo." For the first time in months, Aria's heart actually stuttered. When he walked in, she almost didn't recognize him. His hair was shorter, his shoulders broader, his eyes sharper, like the city had carved something new into him. But when he smiled, it was the same. "Hey, Vale." She stood, trying not to show how her hands trembled. "You didn't tell me you were coming. I wanted to surprise you." He grinned. "Looks like I did." They sat on the couch near her window. The air between them felt both electric and heavy. "So," he said, glancing around, "you've really built an empire." "Something like that. You always said you'd do it. And you always said you'd believe me before I did." He laughed softly, eyes glinting. "Still do." But there was something else in his gaze. "Oh, wait. What's wrong?" she asked. He exhaled. "My contract ended in New York. They offered me another one, but..." He hesitated. "I don't think I want to stay." Aria tilted her head. "So what do you want?" "I want to come home." The words hit her chest like a heartbeat she hadn't felt in years. They talked for hours, about work, art, exhaustion, everything and nothing. For the first time in forever, Aria laughed without checking the clock. When Theo finally stood to leave, he turned back. "Aria," he said quietly, "don't let your success make you forget why you started. You were always designing from pain. Now you have to learn to design from peace." That night, his words wouldn't leave her. Design from peace. What did peace even look like for her? The next morning, she woke up before dawn and went to the studio. The city was asleep, and for the first time in months, she didn't open her laptop or check emails. She sat in front of a blank canvas of fabric and started sketching something new, something softer, freer. Days turned into weeks. The new line she was working on looked nothing like her older, rigid, fiery creations. This one breathed. It felt alive. When the collection debuted under the name Haven, critics were divided. Some said she'd lost her edge. Others said she'd found her soul. Aria didn't care what they thought. For the first time, she wasn't designing for revenge. She was designing for herself. But not everyone was happy about it. A month after the launch, a headline appeared online. Aria Vale accused of stealing design concept from emerging brand. The accusation came from a small boutique label, ironically, one based in her old hometown. They claimed her Haven collection mirrored their sketches. The internet, hungry for drama, ate it up. Comment sections turned vicious. Former fans tweeted about fallen idols. Influencers debated her ethics. Aria stared at her screen in disbelief. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. Lena stood beside her, tense. "They've already filed a complaint with the Design Guild. It's gaining traction." Aria rubbed her temples. "Who's behind that boutique?" Lena hesitated. "It's someone named Caroline Vale." Aria froze. "What?" Lena nodded slowly. "I checked the registry. She's your cousin." Aria's chest burned. Of course. She hadn't spoken to Caroline in nearly a decade. The same cousin who'd mocked her thrift store sketches at family dinners was now trying to destroy her career. The betrayal was sharp, but familiar. Theo came to the studio that night. She told him everything. He listened, pacing, then said, "You could crush this in court." "I could," she said. "But if I fight, it'll look like guilt." "Then what are you going to do?" Aria's jaw tightened. "Win. The same way I always do. By being undeniable." The next morning, she called her team. "We're moving up the next launch. New collection. One that'll make everything else look small." "But the accusations," Lena started. "I don't defend myself with words," Aria said. "I do it with work." For the next month, she disappeared from the public eye. No interviews, no statements, no posts. Just fabric, thread, and fury. She poured every ounce of her pain, betrayal, and determination into her designs. The collection, titled Eclipse, was raw and powerful, merging light and shadow, control and chaos. When it debuted, critics called it transcendent. The boutique's accusation crumbled under the spotlight. Caroline Vale's so-called original designs were revealed as AI-generated concept art copied from public databases. The apology never came, but the silence that followed was better. After the storm, Aria went back to her apartment and stood by the window, staring at the skyline. Theo joined her, quiet. You did it again, he said softly. I didn't win, she said. I just survived louder. He smiled faintly. That's still winning. Then he took her hand. It was the first time he'd done that without hesitation. Aria, he murmured, you don't always have to fight alone. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, she let someone stay in the silence with her. The weeks that followed felt different. Lighter. They started working together again, collaborating on designs, sharing ideas. The lines between friendship and something more blurred quietly. But peace never stayed long in Aria's world. One evening, she got a call from an unknown number. Hello. Aria Vale? A woman's voice said. This is from Crown Estate's legal office. I'm calling regarding your parents. Her pulse quickened. What about them? They've defaulted on their property. The house is being foreclosed. They listed you as an emergency contact. Aria's mouth went dry. Why would they do that? Ma'am, they claimed you'd be willing to assist. She hung up without answering. Theo found her hours later, sitting alone in the dark studio. Talk to me, he said softly. They're losing the house, she whispered. The same house they threw me out of. He frowned. What are you going to do? I don't know. He knelt beside her. Aria, listen to me. You don't owe them your rescue. You already gave them enough of your pain. I know, she said. But knowing doesn't make it easier. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept remembering her father's voice. You'll regret this. Maybe he was right. Maybe she'd regret not helping. But maybe she'd regret helping even more. The next morning, she drove to that old neighborhood for the first time since Paris. The house looked smaller now. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown. Her parents were sitting on the porch, arguing quietly. When they saw her, they froze. Her mother was the first to speak. Aria, you came. I did, she said. Not for you. Foreclosure. Her father stood, defensive. We didn't ask for your pity. No, Aria said. You asked for money. He looked away. She stared at the house, the same one where she'd cried on the doorstep at 18. Do you know how many nights I imagined this moment? She said softly. You told me I was on my own. You made sure of it. And I survived. You could have had a daughter to love. Instead, you built an enemy you can't afford. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. We're still your parents. Aria shook her head. Biology doesn't erase betrayal. Her father's voice cracked with frustration. So what? You'll just watch us lose everything? She looked him in the eye. Everything? You lost me years ago. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her car. Her mother called out after her, Aria, please. Don't do this. She stopped just once and looked back. You did this, not me. Then she drove away. When she reached the city, she didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just exhaled. Slow, deep, final. For the first time, she felt truly free. That night, Theo came over again. She told him everything. He didn't say a word, just wrapped his arms around her. They stood like that for a long time, both knowing something had shifted. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. They said I'd never make it alone. Theo smiled faintly. And you didn't. She blinked, confused. You had yourself, he said softly. That's never alone. Aria closed her eyes, resting her head against his chest. For the first time in her life, she believed it. Outside, the world kept moving, the city lights flickering, the wind humming against glass. Inside, Aria Vale, once the unwanted, the rejected, the forgotten, stood in the warmth of her own hard-won peace. And this time when the silence came, it didn't hurt. It healed. By the time winter thawed into spring, the name Aria Lennox wasn't just whispered in local circles anymore. It was showing up on tech forums, small business pages, and even on a startup podcast that called her the new digital storm from the streets of Brighton. The phrase made her laugh. Digital storm? She still lived in the same cracked-wall apartment, still brewed instant coffee in a chipped mug, still worked 18-hour days. Success hadn't changed her surroundings yet, but it had begun to change how people looked at her. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. Clients sought her out instead of her chasing them. Startups wanted her name on their projects. She'd built a small team, 3 freelancers scattered across time zones, and they were loyal to her because she treated them like humans, not code machines. Theo, ever the artist, now managed her company's branding. His artwork splashed across websites that gleamed with her designs. Their synergy was electric. He brought the vision, she built the framework. They worked late nights, side by side, music humming in the background. Sometimes silence sat between them, Not awkward but charged, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. Aria could feel something building, something more than partnership. But she buried it. Feelings were dangerous when life was finally steady. One Friday night, Theo leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing monitor. "You ever realize," he said, "we built all this from nothing? You mean that busted laptop? It's insane." She smiled faintly. "Insane's the right word. You ever wonder what they'd think? Your family." Her smile faltered. "They'd probably say I got lucky. That's what people like them always say when someone they doubted proves them wrong." Theo studied her face, his eyes soft. "It's not luck, Aria. It's revenge in motion." She laughed, but the truth in his voice hit her deeper than she wanted to admit. Revenge in motion. That's exactly what it was. 2 weeks later, she got an email from a tech investor named Dominic Haverfield. He'd seen her work online and wanted to meet about a potential partnership. Aria almost thought it was spam, until she looked him up. Dominic was the co-founder of a firm known for turning small startups into multi-million-dollar companies. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't just knock, it could blow the whole door off. The meeting was set for a Tuesday evening at a rooftop restaurant that screamed wealth. Aria had to borrow a blazer from Kendra, who'd moved out months ago but still dropped by occasionally. "This blazer's seen more job interviews than marriages," Kendra joked, adjusting the shoulders. "Go show that man you're not here to play." Theo insisted on driving her there, despite her protests. "You show up with confidence," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "They don't need to see how hard you've been hustling. They just need to feel that you belong." The view from the rooftop was dizzying. Glass, gold, and money everywhere. Dominic was older, confident, the kind of man who'd made and lost fortunes but never lost his calm. He extended a hand. "Ms. Lennox, pleasure to meet you. I've heard quite a buzz about your work." They talked for nearly 2 hours. Dominic was sharp but surprisingly warm, impressed by how she'd built everything alone. "Your story has grit," he said. "Investors love grit. It tells them you don't crumble." He offered to back her with a small funding deal, a testing ground. If it worked, bigger things would follow. As they shook hands, Aria felt the air shift. This was it. The door she'd been clawing at for years had finally opened a crack. She wasn't about to let it close. Theo was waiting outside in the car, nervously bouncing his leg. When she slid into the passenger seat, he searched her face. "Well," she grinned. "He's in." Theo exhaled so loudly it made her laugh. "I knew it. I told you. You're unstoppable, Aria." But as the days passed and Dominic's team began sending over contracts and schedules, Aria noticed Theo growing distant. He still worked with her, but there was a shadow behind his usual energy. One night, when she caught him scrolling through job listings, she finally asked, "What's going on?" He hesitated. "Just thinking ahead." "About what?" "You. This company. Where you're headed." He looked at her, eyes tired. "You're about to outgrow everything, Aria. Including me." Her chest tightened. "Don't say that." "It's true," he said softly. "You're on the verge of something huge. And I'm just the guy who drew your first logo." She stepped closer. "You're the reason I even had a logo. Don't you get it? You're part of this." He didn't look convinced. "Yeah. For now." That night, Aria couldn't sleep. Success had always been her dream, but it had never come with this ache. She didn't know how to celebrate without feeling like she was losing something, too. The following week, Dominic invited her to a tech gala, a high-profile networking event where big investors mingled with the next wave. He wanted to introduce her to potential partners. Aria hesitated, but he insisted. "You belong there, Aria. Stop thinking small." Theo offered to come, but she told him not to. "It's a business thing," she said. He nodded, but she saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes. The gala was dazzling. Music, champagne, conversations that felt rehearsed. Dominic stayed close, introducing her to people who smiled too perfectly. For a moment, Aria felt proud. She was finally in rooms she'd once only seen in magazines. But then, one of the women Dominic introduced her to said something that froze her heart. "Oh, I've heard of you," the woman said with a half smile. "You're the girl from that story online, right? The one who got kicked out by her parents and built a company from scratch? What a PR dream." Aria blinked. How did you hear about that?" "Dominic mentioned it," the woman said breezily. "It's inspiring, really. He's already got his marketing team drafting a From Rejection to Riches campaign idea around you." Aria's chest went cold. When she found Dominic later, she asked, "You told them my story?" He smiled, unbothered. Of course. It's your brand. People love a comeback story. This could go viral. She stared at him. That's my life, not your campaign. Aria, he said calmly. That story is your asset now. Don't waste it. People don't buy products. They buy pain turned into progress. And you've got the perfect narrative. Something twisted in her stomach. She'd fought so hard to escape being a spectacle, and now, her success was being packaged for clicks. When she got home, Theo was waiting in the dark studio, paint-stained fingers tapping the desk. How was the gala? She tossed her heels aside. Enlightening. He could tell she was upset. What happened? They want to sell my story, she said bitterly. Turn it into some poster girl redemption tale. Theo frowned. That's disgusting. I know. She sank into the couch. And the worst part? It would work. They'd make millions off it. He hesitated before asking, are you going to let them? She didn't answer right away. Part of her wanted to scream no, but another part, the practical, battle-hardened part, knew what visibility could mean. Every dollar could build her future further from her past. Days passed. Dominic's proposal arrived in her inbox, a full marketing strategy that centered on her underdog journey. Aria read it twice, feeling both powerful and violated. The photo mock-ups were polished. Her standing tall with the caption, she was kicked out with nothing. Now she's redefining everything. Theo saw the draft on her screen and clenched his jaw. Tell me you're not signing that. Maybe I should, she said quietly. If I don't, someone else will take the spotlight. I've earned this, Theo. He looked at her like she'd become someone he didn't recognize. You've earned respect, not exploitation. It's business, she said. He shook his head. You sound just like them. That line cut deep. For a long time after he left, she just sat there, staring at the blinking cursor on her screen. The room felt emptier than ever. But somewhere in her chest, a decision was forming, not out of fear, but out of defiance. Maybe Dominic thought he could use her story. Maybe her parents thought they could still define her. Maybe everyone thought they knew who Aria Lennox was. They didn't. That night, she opened a new document. No company name, no investor input, just her and the screen. She started drafting something new, something that didn't need permission. A platform that would help other self-taught people like her, those who'd been thrown out, doubted, dismissed, to learn, connect, and earn without gatekeepers. The idea pulsed like lightning through her fingers. She'd build it quietly, without fanfare, without letting Dominic or anyone else own a piece of it. By dawn, Theo still hadn't come back. She stared at the city through the fogged-up window, exhaustion pulling at her eyes. The silence was heavier than it had ever been. But beneath it all, Aria smiled faintly. Because this time, she wasn't chasing revenge. She was building legacy. And when they finally came knocking, her family, Dominic, everyone who once looked down on her, she'd be ready. The weeks that followed felt like living between two worlds, one polished in public, the other raw in private. By day, Aria wore confidence like armor, attending meetings with Dominic's investors, shaping her growing company's image, and watching her name rise in tech circles. But by night, she buried herself in the secret project she'd started, the platform that was hers alone. She called it RiseNet. The idea was simple but radical. A digital space where anyone could learn real-world skills without the gatekeeping, without the elitism, without needing anyone's permission to start. It was everything she wished she'd had when she was 18, standing outside her parents' house with nothing but a bag of clothes and stubborn pride. Theo still hadn't come around. Their last argument echoed in her mind every night, the way his voice cracked when he said she sounded like them. She tried calling him, texting him, even showing up at his art studio once. But he wasn't there. The walls were stripped bare, the canvases gone. Only a single note had been left behind, scrawled on the back of a paint-splattered envelope. Sometimes, to find yourself, you have to lose everything for a while. She read it 100 times. It felt like a goodbye she hadn't been ready for. Still, she kept building. Dominic's team wanted updates, so she split her attention, polished presentations for them, and sleepless nights coding for herself. There were moments when she thought she couldn't handle both, but every time fatigue hit, she remembered the laughter of her old classmates at the diner. The image fueled her. She'd come too far to stop now. Then, one afternoon, a headline hit the internet that froze her blood. From throwaway teen to tech titan, the Aria Lennox story. Her photo, one she'd never authorized, was plastered across half a dozen news outlets. The story painted her as a miracle case of corporate redemption, twisting her past into a sob story tailored for clicks. Dominic's firm was quoted multiple times, framing her as their latest success story. Her phone lit up with messages from clients, acquaintances, journalists, and, for the first time in years, her mother. The text was short. "We saw the article. So proud of you, honey. Let's talk soon." For a moment, Aria just stared at the screen. Her hands were trembling. They hadn't spoken in years. Not a birthday. Not a single check-in. And now that her name was finally something valuable, they wanted to talk. She didn't respond. Not yet. That night, Dominic called. "Congratulations, Aria. The piece is blowing up. You're trending across 3 major platforms." "You leaked it," she said flatly. He paused, then sighed. "Look, I had to move fast. The buzz was there. It would have been a crime not to capitalize. You'll thank me later. I told you I didn't want that story public." "And I told you this is business," he countered, his voice turning sharp. "You want to change the world, right? That takes visibility. Exposure. You can't inspire people if they don't know you exist." Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to sell my pain, Dominic. You think you're the first to feel that way?" He scoffed. "Everyone wants the glory, Aria. No one wants the process. Welcome to the big leagues." She hung up before he finished. Her pulse was racing, but not from fear anymore, from fury. For the first time, she realized that Dominic wasn't her partner. He was her replacement father figure, someone who wanted control disguised as mentorship, just like the man who'd thrown her out at 18. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. She opened her private development folder for RiseNet, packed with code she'd been working on in secret for months. Then she went into her company's shared drive and began quietly transferring all her personal projects, notes, and prototypes away from Dominic's servers. She wasn't stealing. She was taking back what was hers. The next morning, she tendered her resignation. Dominic called her 5 times, sent 3 furious emails, and finally showed up outside her office, his smile gone. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he hissed. "We invested in you, Aria." "You invested in a brand," she replied calmly. "I never signed over my soul." "You're making a mistake." "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "I'm correcting one." He leaned in, voice low and venomous. "You won't survive without us." She smiled faintly. "That's what my parents said too." Then she walked past him and didn't look back. For the next several weeks, Aria worked in silence. She poured everything into RiseNet, every ounce of hurt, ambition, and fire she'd ever had. The project began to take shape faster than she expected. The interface was sleek, intuitive, and powerful. She reached out to freelancers she trusted, quietly recruiting a small team under non-disclosure agreements. One night, after nearly 40 hours without sleep, she hit the launch beta button. The screen flickered, and then it was live. No PR campaign. No sponsors. No investors. Just a single post from her personal account that read, "This is for everyone who was told they'd never make it. Welcome to RiseNet." Within hours, the site exploded with traffic. Thousands of users signed up. Messages poured in. Stories from single parents learning new skills, teenagers teaching themselves to code, people thanking her for giving them a second chance. Aria sat at her desk, staring at the numbers rising in real time, and for the first time in her life, she cried, not from pain, but from pride. By morning, the story had hit every major news outlet again. Only this time, she owned the narrative. And that was when the phone rang. Her mother's voice trembled through the receiver. "Aria, it's Mom. We read about what you've built. Your father and I, well, we'd love to see you. It's been too long." Aria's heart clenched. 1,000 memories rushed back. Her father's glare the day he threw her out, her mother's silence as she closed the door, the endless nights wondering if they ever missed her. She didn't speak for a moment. Then softly she said, "You told me to make it on my own." "I did." "Sweetheart, we made mistakes," her mother said quickly. "Your father regrets everything. We want to make things right." Aria's hand tightened around the phone. "Now that I'm worth something?" "Don't say that," her mother whispered. "You've always been worth something. We just didn't see it then." Aria closed her eyes. The silence on the line was thick. "I don't know if I can believe that anymore." "Please, just come for dinner," her mother pleaded. "One night. For us." She hesitated. Every instinct told her to hang up, to walk away. But deep down, a part of her still wanted closure. Not revenge. Not validation. Just peace. "All right," Aria said finally. One night, when she hung up, the city outside her window glowed with neon lights and possibility. But she knew one thing for sure. This dinner wouldn't just be a reunion. It would be a reckoning. Because now, for the first time, she held all the power. And her parents were about to learn what it really meant when the girl they'd thrown away came back home, successful, unbroken, and no longer afraid to walk through their front door. The invitation to dinner sat in Aria's inbox for 3 days before she accepted. Her mother had sent it as a formal email. Polite, distant, and almost rehearsed. Your father and I would love to have you home for dinner this Friday at 7. It would mean the world to us. The word home made Aria laugh bitterly. That house hadn't been her home in years. Still, she couldn't ignore the pull. She didn't want reconciliation for their sake. She wanted closure for hers. She needed to look her parents in the eyes, to see if the people who once told her she'd never make it alone still believed it. Friday came fast. She stood in front of her mirror for a long time before leaving. No flashy designer outfit. No symbols of her success. Just a simple black dress and a small pendant she'd bought during her lowest days, when she could barely afford a meal. A reminder of who she'd been and who she'd become. When she drove down the familiar old street, her stomach twisted. Every crack in the pavement, every overgrown hedge, it was like driving back through time. The Lennox house looked exactly the same. White shutters, perfectly trimmed lawn, even the same porch light that used to flicker when she'd sneak in after curfew. Her mother opened the door before she could even knock. Aria, she said, smiling a little too brightly. She looked older, her hair more silver than Aria remembered, her eyes softer but lined with something like guilt. Hi, Mom. They hugged awkwardly, like strangers trying to remember how. Inside, everything was painfully familiar. The faint smell of her father's cologne, the same ticking clock, the same family photos on the wall, except none of them included her after age 18. Her father was in the living room, sitting stiffly in his favorite armchair. Aria, he said, his voice even but cautious. You look well. So do you, she said, though the lie burned her tongue. Dinner was laid out perfectly, of course. Her mother had always believed that appearances could fix anything. There was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, even her favorite corn casserole, like they tried to resurrect some picture-perfect family memory. The first few minutes were polite, almost painfully so. Small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, her parents' church group. Her father asked about her business, clearly avoiding the word company. I've been keeping busy, Aria said evenly. RiseNet's growing fast. We just hit 1 million users last week. Her mother's smile froze. 1 million? That's quite a number. Her father cleared his throat. So, about that. I've been reading about it in the papers. You've done well for yourself. Thank you. He hesitated, then added, we always knew you had potential. Aria's fork paused midair. Is that what you call throwing your daughter out? Motivational tough love. Her mother flinched. Aria, please. We've been over this. No, Aria interrupted softly. You've been over it in your heads. I never got a say. Her father exhaled, leaning back. We were trying to teach you responsibility. You were reckless, ungrateful. I was 18, she snapped. You told me to get out because I wouldn't go to college the way you wanted. Because I wanted to build something instead of fitting your mold. Her mother's voice trembled. We didn't know it would hurt you that much. You didn't care enough to find out, Aria said quietly. You just wanted control. The room went still. The ticking clock filled the silence. Her father's voice softened, almost regretful. You've built a life for yourself, Aria. We're proud. Truly. We just want to be part of it again. Part of it, she repeated, tilting her head. You mean now that there's something worth being part of? That's not fair, her mother said. We made mistakes, but we're still family. Aria let out a shaky breath. Family doesn't abandon you when you stop being convenient. Her father sighed, setting down his fork. You think we're after your money. Is that it? Aria didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence spoke for her. He chuckled bitterly. Unbelievable. We invite you home, and you assume the worst. Because the last time I was in this house, she said, her voice breaking slightly, you made me feel like I was the worst. Her mother reached out, tears forming. Aria, please. We're trying. Now, maybe, she said, standing up. But you can't just rewrite history because I finally became someone. Her father's pride flickered, then cracked. You think you did this all on your own? You wouldn't even be who you are without how we raised you. Aria turned toward him, anger and pain burning through her chest. You're right. I learned how to survive from you. I learned how to fight from you. But love? Kindness? I had to teach myself that. The silence that followed was deafening. Her mother began to cry softly. Her father looked down, jaw clenched, unable to meet her eyes. Aria stood there for a moment, her heart pounding, then whispered, "I didn't come here to punish you. I came because I needed to see if you were still the same people who threw me out." She glanced toward the door. "And you are." She grabbed her coat, but as she turned to leave, her mother caught her hand. "Aria, wait." Aria looked at her, at the desperate, aging woman who'd once closed a door between them, and for a fleeting moment, pity replaced anger. "You don't need to prove anything anymore," her mother said. "You've already won." Aria's throat tightened. "It was never about winning, Mom. It was about surviving what you did to me." She gently pulled her hand free and walked out the door. Outside, the air was cold and still. She stood on the front steps, staring at the house she'd once dreamed of returning to, realizing she'd finally stopped needing it. As she reached her car, a familiar voice called out from the sidewalk. "I thought I might find you here." She turned, and there was Theo, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes weary but warm. Her breath caught. "Theo." He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd face them alone, did you?" "How did you know?" "I saw the post about the dinner." "You might be brilliant at building empires, Aria, but you're terrible at hiding your heart." She laughed through the tears that finally fell. "You shouldn't have come." "Yeah, well," he said softly, stepping closer. "I left once. I'm not making that mistake again." The porch light flickered above them, the same way it had when they were kids sneaking out under curfew. But this time, Aria didn't feel small. She felt free. She looked back at the house one last time and then at Theo. "You ready to go?" "Wherever you're heading," he said. "I'm in." As they drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. Aria exhaled, her hand resting loosely on the steering wheel, a peace settling in her chest she'd never known before. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from her past. She'd faced it, and it had no power left. Theo glanced over at her and smiled. "You know," he said, "for someone who was told she'd never make it, you did pretty damn well." Aria laughed softly, the sound almost foreign after so many tears. "Yeah," she said. "And the best part? I did it my way." The city lights glimmered in the distance, a horizon she'd built for herself, one no one could ever take away again. The night of the award gala was painted in gold. Chandeliers shimmered like suspended stars, and every camera flash reflected off the silk of Aria's gown, the same deep emerald that matched the pendant Theo once gave her when she was 19 and broke. That necklace, though worn and simple, glowed against her skin as though it had absorbed every hardship she'd endured and was now shining it back into the world. The MC's voice carried across the hall, and the Innovator of the Year award goes to Aria Solon, founder of Solon Studios. Applause exploded. Aria's body felt weightless as she walked to the stage. For a moment, she saw flashes of her 18-year-old self, standing outside her parents' house with a duffel bag, trembling hands, and nothing but a half-broken phone. And now, here she was, standing at a podium in front of hundreds of people, the name Solon echoing in applause instead of scorn. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake. "Sometimes," she began, "the people who throw you away are the ones who teach you how to stand. I thought I needed their approval to survive. Turns out, I only needed to stop asking for it." The crowd rose to their feet. Cameras captured tears, claps, and that gleam of victory that can only come from surviving what should have destroyed you. After the ceremony, Aria walked outside, her heels clicking against the marble steps. Theo waited by the car, hands in his pockets, a quiet smile curving his lips. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," she replied. They didn't need to say more. Their journey from cheap diner coffees and sleepless nights to global recognition had rewritten everything. But the universe, as always, had a sense of irony. Her phone buzzed. The caller ID froze her mid-step. Mom. Theo's gaze flickered to her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly but didn't answer. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen, the name that once meant safety now representing a wound that never fully healed. When she finally answered, her mother's voice came trembling through. "Aria? It's your father. He's not doing well. We've been watching you on the news and..." A pause. Not a word about the years of silence. Not a word about the nights Aria cried herself to sleep wishing they'd call. Only desperation. Only now. "We're so proud of you," her mother added, voice tight and uncertain. "We were wrong. Your father, he wants to see you. He keeps saying he's sorry." Aria felt the air grow colder. The sounds of the gala faded into a blur. Laughter, chatter, camera shutters, all dissolving into an ache that burned quietly behind her ribs. Theo placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't owe them anything. But Aria wasn't sure if she wanted revenge anymore. Not really. She'd lived her revenge. Every sleepless night turned into success. Every rejection transformed into drive. And now, standing under the city lights, she realized she had already won long before this call. Still, she whispered, I'll go. When she arrived at her parents' home 2 days later, the same house that once felt too small to hold her dreams looked even smaller now. The curtains were faded, the paint chipped, the front steps creaked. Her mother opened the door, eyes swollen from crying. She reached out, hesitated, then pulled Aria into a shaky hug. Inside, her father lay in a reclining chair, frail and gray, the years having stolen his pride. His eyes widened when he saw her. Disbelief, shame, something else too. Aria, he rasped. You came. I did, she said quietly. For a long time there was silence. Then he whispered, I'm sorry. I thought I was teaching you to be strong. I didn't realize I was just pushing you away. Aria's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why he never came after her. But instead, she reached into her purse and took out a small envelope. I built a scholarship fund, she said, for kids who get kicked out or left behind. I'm naming it after you, the Solon Fund. Maybe some good can still come from what happened. Her father's lips trembled, and for a moment, she saw the man who once taught her how to ride a bike, not the one who had locked the door behind her. Her mother began to sob softly in the corner. Aria, please, can we start over? Aria smiled faintly. You taught me something valuable. That love without respect isn't love. I forgive you. But I've built a life where I finally feel free. And I'm not coming back. She turned to leave, pausing only when her father's voice broke behind her. We're proud of you, Aria. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Some apologies don't need to be answered. Some silences speak louder. Outside, Theo waited by the car again, leaning against it with a soft grin. How'd it go? She took a deep breath. Closure. The kind that doesn't hurt anymore. They drove off, the road stretching ahead like an unwritten chapter. Aria rolled down the window, the wind catching her hair as city lights blurred into streaks of gold. Her phone buzzed again, another message from her parents. She didn't open it. Instead, she looked out at the skyline, at everything she'd built, and whispered, almost to herself. They said I'd never make it alone. Now they call me for money. Theo glanced at her, smiling knowingly. And what did you say? Aria looked ahead, eyes bright with something fierce and peaceful all at once. I let the silence answer. 5 years later, the world knew Aria Solon not just as a tech innovator, but as a symbol, the girl who was thrown out and built an empire from the ashes. The Solon Fund had grown beyond what even she imagined. Thousands of young adults rebuilding their lives, scholarships spreading across cities, mentorship programs connecting dreamers who'd once been discarded. The office of Solon Studios gleamed with quiet warmth. No sterile corporate gloss. Just sunlight, soft greenery, and art painted by the very kids her foundation helped. Aria stood before the glass wall overlooking the city that had once swallowed her whole. Theo entered, holding 2 mugs of coffee, still the same brand they'd shared when they couldn't afford anything better. Board meeting in 10, he said. And he handed her a letter, old-fashioned, handwritten, the kind she rarely got. Aria unfolded it slowly. The paper trembled slightly in her hands when she saw the names at the bottom, Mom and Dad. The handwriting was careful, shaky, but familiar. Dear Aria, we don't deserve your forgiveness, but thank you for giving it anyway. Your father talks about you every day. The doctors say he doesn't have much time, but I think he's hanging on because he wants to see you one more time, even if it's from afar. The Solon Fund changed everything here. The local kids talk about you like you're some kind of hero. Maybe you are. Maybe you always were. We just didn't see it then. Love. Mom. Aria stared at the signature for a long time. Then she folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the drawer, beside Theo's first sketch for their studio, and the old house key she'd carried for years. Theo watched her quietly. You're not going? Aria shook her head. No. Some doors stay closed so new ones can open. Theo nodded, not pressing. He'd learned long ago that silence could be healing, not avoidance. They walked out together, down to the Foundation's courtyard where a ceremony was being held, the unveiling of a new mentorship wing for creative youth. A banner fluttered across the archway. The Solon Center for Second Chances. A group of young people stood in line, nervous, hopeful, just like she once was. Aria took the stage, microphone in hand, eyes warm but strong. "When I was 18, she began. Someone told me I'd never make it alone. But I wasn't alone. I had people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And if you're standing here today, it means you're not alone either." A hush fell over the crowd. Theo stood at the side, pride in his eyes. Aria's gaze softened as she looked out, not at the cameras, not at the applause, but at the faces filled with hunger, pain, and hope. The faces that once mirrored hers. "Life," she said quietly, "will try to convince you that you're only worth what others see. But the truth is, worth is something you build in silence, when no one's watching." The audience erupted into applause. Later that night, Aria and Theo stood on the rooftop as the city glimmered below. She leaned against the railing, smiling faintly. "You know," she murmured, "I used to think success would erase the pain. But it didn't. It just gave it meaning." Theo took her hand. "And you turned it into light." They stayed there, watching the skyline fade into dawn. Somewhere, in a small town miles away, Aria's parents watched her speech on TV. Her mother wept softly while her father, too weak to speak, smiled with pride one last time before closing his eyes. And for the first time, the silence between them didn't ache. It just was peaceful, still, and whole. Aria's voice echoed in the final frame. "They said I'd never make it alone. And they were right, because I didn't just make it. I built a world.